Well, hey, welcome back to Leadership Clearly. I'm Julie, and if you're new to this podcast is made for Christian leaders, business owners, founders, and growth minded people who want to lead with clarity, communication with strength, and build teams that actually last. Over the last few weeks, we've spent a lot of time talking about communication, and for good reason. Communication is foundational. But today, I want to pivot into another area that I care very deeply about, and I've spent years living in it. And that, my friends, is scaling and growing teams. Because here's a truth bomb for you: a lot of leaders know how to build something small. Fewer leaders know how to build something that can actually scale. There's a massive difference between building a team and building a scalable team. And if you do not understand the difference, growth can start to feel more like pressure than progress. So today, we're going to break that down. What changes when a team starts growing? What actually makes a team scalable? And what do leaders need to understand before they hire, expand, and try to multiply what they've built? So grab your coffee, or if you're like me, grab your Alani Nu. Today I'm drinking pink slush. Grab your journal or note taking device and let's dive in. Okay, this is where we're going to start today. Building a team is not the same as building a scalable team. So, when you build a team, it often begins with need, right? You need help, you need support, you need more hands, more capacity, more ideas, more execution. So, you bring people in. And that is not wrong because every team starts somewhere. But just because you have people does not mean that you have a scalable team. A team can function in a small environment on hustle, loyalty, goodwill, and proximity. Everyone knows everything, right? Everybody is close enough to ask questions in real time. People fill gaps in on the fly. No, we're going to try that again. A team can function in a small environment on hustle, loyalty, goodwill, and proximity. Everybody knows everything. Everybody is close enough to ask questions in real time. People fill in gaps on the fly. The leader is in everything. Decisions happen fast because usually one person is carrying most of the weight. That can work for a season, absolutely. But the moment growth starts happening, that same model, it begins to break down. That same model begins to break down. Why? Because what worked in a small environment often does not work in a growing one. A scalable team is not just a group of talented people. It's a team built on infrastructure. There's clarity, there's ownership, there are rhythms, there's accountability, there are documented expectations. Hello, HR. People know who owns what. People know who owns what. They know how to get decisions made, they know how communication flows, and they know what success looks like. That is the difference. Building a team is about adding people. Building a scalable team is about building a structure people can thrive inside of. And I think this is where many leaders get frustrated. And I think this is where many leaders get frustrated. They think that growth itself is the problem, but growth is often not the problem. Growth just exposes what was fragile all along. This is one of the biggest lessons in scaling. Growth reveals cracks. It reveals weak communication. It un- it reveals unclear roles. It reveals inconsistent leadership. It reveals the absence of systems, and it reveals whether your culture was intentional or just convenient. When you're small, people can make up for a lot. Strong strong personalities cover weak systems. Hard workers compensate for poor process. A loyal employee will fill the gap in that probably should have been owned by a leader. A founder can personally solve every issue because there aren't that many issues yet. But as the team grows and your business grows, the cracks widen. Suddenly, communication gets super messy. Two people think they own the same thing. Three people assume somebody else handled it. Meetings increase, but clarity decreases. You hire to solve overload, but somehow there's more You hire to solve overload, but somehow there's more confusion than there was before. Something I like to say is there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I'm sure you've heard that before. This one reigns true. And this is because growth multiplies what already exists. If you have clarity, growth will multiply clarity. If you have confusion, growth will multiply confusion. If you have healthy leadership, growth strengthens if you have healthy leadership, growth strengthens the team. If you have dysfunction, growth spreads it faster. This is why scaling has to be intentional. You can't add people and just hope that maturity appears. You can't keep everything in your head and expect the team to move in on alignment. You cannot keep everything in your head and expect the team to move in alignment. You cannot say you want ownership and then micromanage every decision. You cannot expect a team to scale if the culture only works when you're in the middle of every conversation. Now, let's connect this. Now, let's connect this to where we have been for the last few weeks on the podcast, okay? You cannot build a scalable team without strong communication. You just can't. Scalable teams are not sustained by charisma, they're sustained by clarity. That means leaders have to get serious about how they communicate expectations, priorities, values, feedback, change, and vision. If your team has to constantly guess what you mean, that is not leadership clarity. If your people aren't if your people are unsure what matters most, you're not in alignment. If feedback only happens when something goes wrong, that is not healthy communication. If expectations live in your head, but not in your leadership, my friends, that is not a scalable environment. Healthy scaling requires communication that is clear, repeatable, and consistent. That means you say the same things more than once. You define success clearly. You clarify roles clearly. You create regular touch points. You address confusion quickly. You make space for questions. You do not assume people know what you meant. And you lead proactively, not just reactively. This is also why I care so much about the clarity code. Y'all know I had to throw a plug in here somewhere today. Guys, leaders do not just need more confidence. I mean, we all need some confidence, right? But we need more than that. Leaders need tools. They need language. They need discernment. They need to know how to communicate in a way that helps people feel clear. They need to know how to communicate. They need to know how to communicate in a way that helps people feel clear, accountable, and supported. Because communication is not just a soft skill, it's a scaling skill. And honestly, a lot of leaders are just trying to solve scaling problems with hiring when what they really need is stronger communication. So let's talk systems, right? Scalable teams need systems, not just talent. A lot of leaders love vision. Fewer leaders love systems. I am one of the rare leaders. I enjoy systems. I love me a good CRM. I love me a good SOP, right? But here's the truth. If you want to build a scalable team and you're not into systems and you don't have that vision for systems at all, I hate to break it to you, but systems matter and you're going to need to make a change. Now, when I say systems, when I say systems, I don't mean that you need to become some robotic or corporate dry. I don't, gosh darn it. Now, when I say systems, I don't mean that you need to become robotic or too corporate or dry, right? I mean, your team needs a repeatable way of operating the business. How do new people get onboarded? How are your goals communicated? How are one on ones happening? How often are they happening? What do you guys talk about in those one on ones? How do you measure success? How are your projects tracked? What gets documented? Who owns decisions? How does communication move across team? How does communication move across the team? What happens when there's a miss? How are values reinforced in everyday leadership? I want you to think about this. And if every answer to those questions is it depends, then I'm going to be very frank with you. Scaling is going to be very painful. Scaling creates stability. Systems, systems create stability. Systems reduce confusion. Systems help people operate with confidence. Systems help protect the team from unnecessary chaos. And systems make leadership transferable. And that means because talent alone, oh God, and this matters because talent alone cannot carry a growing organization. You can have amazing people and still have a incredibly big mess. You can hire smart, driven, gifted team members and still create confusion if they walk into ambiguity every day. Great people do not eliminate the need for systems. Great people deserve good systems. That's one of the biggest mindset shifts. Say that again 3 times. That is one of the biggest mindset shifts leaders need to make. But here's the thing. I'm going to not say. So the leader has to change too, though, right? This might be the most important part. This might be the most important part. If the team is going to scale, the leader has to scale too. You cannot lead a growing team the same way you led a tiny one. You just can't. In the early days, maybe your value came from doing, moving, fixing, carrying, deciding, jumping in, saving the day, saving the day, being the one that everyone relied on. But eventually, that becomes a bottleneck. And a scalable leader moves. A scalable leader moves from being the hero to being the builder, from doing everything to developing others, from controlling every detail to creating a healthy ownership. And here's the last one, from reacting constantly to leading intentionally. This is that big shift, right? From being reactive to being proactive. Let me just say this very plainly to you, too. If everything still depends on you, and I want you to hear this, and don't be offended, but if you need to be offended, that's okay. Sometimes we get offended because we feel like someone's looking right at our faces when we're listening to a podcast with someone we probably don't know. If everything still depends on you, you do not have a scalable team yet. Guys, this is not condemnation. I promise you that. It's awareness, though, because many strong leaders accidentally build dependency instead of building ownership. They're capable, they're fast, they're responsible, they're deeply committed, right? But in the process, they train the team to look up to them for every answer instead of stepping up with confidence. Scaling requires trust. It requires delegation, it requires coaching, it requires patience, it requires leaders to let people grow. And even if they do it the way, it requires leaders to let people grow, even if they do not do it the way you would do it. And that is hard for a lot of leaders, but it's necessary. So let's talk culture for a minute, okay? Because culture gets romanticized a lot. Culture is not snacks in the break room. It's not a fun Slack channel. It's not saying we're all like family while people are secretly being burned out and confused. Culture is how your team experiences leadership every single day. It's how conflict is handled. It's how expectations are reinforced. It's how trust is built. It's how accountability is lived out. It's how values show up in pressure, not just in mission statements. Small teams can get away with the informal culture because everyone is close enough to feel it, right? Growing teams need culture that is named, modeled, and reinforced. If not, people will create their own version of what matters. And as a Christian leader, I'm calling you out on this one. If you're listening to this, this matters deeply because culture is stewardship. The way you lead people should reflect integrity, wisdom, honesty, accountability, humility, and care. Scaling should not mean becoming cold, right? It should mean becoming more intentional. So let's look at some practical markers of a scalable team. What does a scalable team actually look like? A scalable team has clear roles and responsibilities. People know what they own. A scalable team has communication rhythms. Their regular check ins, feedback loops, and predictable way. Oh, God, I can't say predictable. They're scalable. A scalable team has communication rhythms. There are regular check ins, feedback loops, and a predictable ways. Fuck. There are regular check ins, feedback loops, and predictable ways of staying aligned. A scalable team has documented processes. Important things are not trapped in one person's brain. Get it on an SOP. If you don't know what an SOP is, it's a standard operating procedure. They have really, really great free resources on YouTube, but there's also a podcaster out there. Her name's Jasmine Star. I absolutely adore her. And she actually has a podcast about creating a killer SOP. And I have to tell you, I've done it. It's absolutely fantastic. So if you have a chance, go check it out. I think you can probably just Google Jasmine Star podcast and then type in SOP. It should totally pop up. A scalable team has accountability. People know what is expected and what happens when standards are missed. A scalable team develops people. The leader is not just extracting output, the leader is growing capacity, right? A scalable team protects culture on purpose. Values, they're not just talked about, they're actually practiced. A scalable team can function without constant rescue. This is a big one. The leader is still present, but the leader is not the only one holding the whole thing together. Guys, that's the goal. Not perfection, not corporate polish, not control. The goal is healthy, sustainable, intentional growth. So, my friends, if you're in a season of growth right now, or maybe you want to try to grow, or try that again. So, if you're in a season of growth right now, or maybe you want to try to grow, so if you're in a season of growth right now, or maybe you want to grow, here's the question I want to leave you with today. Are you building, are you just building a team, or are you building a team that can actually scale? Because growth is grit, my friends, and unmanaged growth can become absolute chaos. And adding people without clarity will only magnify what is already broken. Your job as a leader is not just to gather people, it's to build an environment where people can thrive, where they can lead, communicate well, and carry on the mission with strength. And if communication is one of those areas that you know you need work on as you grow, make sure you check out the Clarity Code. It launches very soon and it's a 5-day boot camp, very well affordable. It's built for leaders who want to become better, stronger communicators, help them understand their people better, and lead teams with more trust, clarity, and confidence. All right. So before you grow, before you hire again, let's try that again. Okay. So before you grow, before you hire again, why did I just say? All right. So let's close this out today with identifying weak points before you scale. This is an absolute must. Before you grow, before you hire again, before you expand your reach or increase your headcount, you have to be honest with the weak points in your current team. I don't care if your team is 2 people, 10 people, or 50 people. Every team has pressure points. Every leader has blind spots. Every organization has something that feels fine in a smaller season, but will absolutely become a bigger problem if it's left unchecked. Maybe your weak point is communication. Maybe expectations are not clear. Maybe roles are blurry. Maybe accountability is inconsistent. Maybe your onboarding is weak. Maybe your team depends too heavily on you for every answer, every decision, and every save. And that's not failure, it's leadership awareness. And you'll hear me talk about leadership awareness a lot if you listen to this podcast. We have to be aware of our leadership qualities and capabilities because if we're not, we're just going to be like a bull in a china shop. And nobody wants a leader like that. Healthy leaders are willing to stop and ask, where am I fragile? Where am I unclear? Where am I where am I carrying hidden dysfunction that growth will only magnify? Because my friends, scaling does not fix the weak point. It exposes them. Because my friends, oh shit. Because my friends, scaling does not fix weak points. It exposes them. And the stronger your awareness is now, while your team is small, or maybe you don't even have a team yet and you're preparing to grow your team, get your awareness in point and in check now because your team can grow stronger, faster, quicker. And the stronger your awareness is now, the stronger your team can become later. So, as we finish this episode today, I just want to challenge you to take some inventory, not just of who is on your team, but how your team actually functions. Now, this also goes for the solopreneur who is wanting to scale. These are scenarios you can think of for your very near future and put them into practice now. Where is the confusion? Where could there be confusion? Where is there unnecessary dependence? Where is there unnecessary dependence? Where are things still living in your head that need to be documented, clarified, or handed off? Because identifying the weak points is not negative, it's wise. And and it's how healthy leaders prepare for real growth. Next week, we're going to take this one step further, okay? We're going to talk about some of the systems you need to have in place if you actually want to scale, not just to grow fast, but grow strong. The systems, the rhythms, the structures that help, oh, Jesus. The systems, rhythms, and the structures that support healthy communication, clear ownership, accountability, and sustainable momentum. So, you do not want to miss next week's episode. So, you do not want to miss next week's episode because we're going to get practical. So, you do not want to miss next week's episode because we're going to get practical and I'm going to get a little nerdy. And I absolutely cannot wait.